Hey there. So today I'm speaking with friend and Reiki healer, among other things, Tori from Philosophy Porch Coaching. Um, so Tori, thank you for coming on here and just talking about your work and your passion and your story.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a big fan. I'm all about the moon magic, like amazingness. So this is really exciting to be here.
It's a good time. So I guess was it a year and a half ago or something like that, before I had one of those rebalance retreats that you reached out to me to
Yeah.
say like, hey, I live in Hillsdale and can I come to your event? Like, that's how it happened, right? That we got
Yeah,
to
that's
each
pretty much
other.
how it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, yeah, I don't even remember. I just was like, sure, and then, slowly got to know you. I think, yeah, then you came to me for like a refresher slash follow up or whatever with Reiki, because you learned Reiki remotely. So you just had a couple questions about things.
Mhm.
So, and
Yep.
then I realized how gifted you were in just our interaction. So I'm just curious to hear, your story about, I know you had a different background, like a different career background. So why don't you just fill people in on your, a little bit about you, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Sure. No, absolutely. So I had kind of, I guess, starting at the beginning, I always grew up in a very spiritual household. I was very young when I started to realize, and my parents started to realize that I had some psychic gifts that came in very, very clearly. And I was very fortunate to have parents who really fostered my exploration of these gifts
Hmm.
and told me, that it was okay to have these things and this was normal. And so I really was able to embrace myself in that way at a very young age. Um, I went through pretty traditional like schooling and whatnot, was very ambitious, wanted to like, set the world on fire in typical Sagittarius fashion.
Hmm.
And I wound up going into what wound up being a tax law type of a position. Went through law school, basically kind of went through all of the checklists of life in terms of like, oh, look, I'm doing all the successful things. I'm setting up my life. It's going to be amazing. And when I had reached the point of what everyone would consider to be stereotypical successful, as I use my little
Hmm.
air quotes there,
Hmm.
I found that I was not happy and something was missing.
Hmm.
And it was it really came to a head when after I had my first son and I was working these crazy hours. I was working like 70-hour weeks. And I realized I had this kind of breakthrough moment at the end of 2019. And what that facilitated was this transformation into me being able to reprioritize my life, being able to understand what was important to me and what was holding me back, as
Hmm.
opposed to what was helping me move forward into my purpose on an individual level. And that led to my spiritual awakening in a more formal sense, and the dark nights of the souls, and all of the beautiful things that unfolded from there.
Hmm.
So it was a kind of a crazy journey, as most of us have when this with the spiritual awakenings, but it
Yeah.
was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And here I am. So I was in 2019. Here I am almost 5 years later, and I've completely changed my life. I went from being super stressed out, burnt out, like your stereotypical burnout case in a very international tax firm,
Hmm.
and I was had all of these check marks in terms of what was successful, how to build this great life, and nothing was making me happy. And here I am, completely different, like
Yeah.
working full-time mom with 3 kids and running my own business part-time, doing the things that I love, connecting back with my spirituality, really expanding my gifts and being able to fully embrace myself and my total authenticity. And I couldn't be happier. Like I found my bliss because I just embraced who I was and what makes my soul sing instead of just following a checklist of what I was expecting of myself.
Right. Yeah, that reminds me of my business coach friend, Sarah Walton. She
Okay.
said that she had her moment too, where she was in her corner office with her FICA tree, and that was like a turning point, because she was like so sad that she like didn't she only saw her kids in their pajamas, because she would get them up in the morning and tuck them in at night, but that was basically it. So that was her turning point moment. So it sounds similar, where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And what was your childhood like experiences with visions or with spirit visits or whatever?
Yeah,
Curious
absolutely.
what your
Absolutely.
parents supported in you, which is awesome that they did and they didn't shut you down.
Yeah, no, there were a number of different experiences. Just to speak to kind of the ones where I was directly like speaking to them, one of kind of the one that sticks out in my mind is I was probably about 3 years old. And my parents had had a child that passed away when after about 2 months being born. And it was very devastating. It was a very traumatic experience. Um, and then about a year later, I came along and, things were getting better. Everybody was healing. So I'm about 3 years old. I'm sitting there. My mom says I was like swinging my feet on my chair, eating my Cheerios. And my mom, I turned around to my mom. I said, Mom, Mommy, I was calling you last night. I was scared, but you didn't come. And my mom turned around, was like devastated, like, oh my God, how could I not have heard you? She was like
Mm.
so upset. And I said, but it's okay. Don't worry. My sister came to visit me.
Oh,
And she told me that she was always going to be with me and she was always going to protect me. And she was dressed in these blue robes and she stayed with me until I felt better. And she said she'd never leave me.
oh my
And
gosh. It makes me
my
want to
mom,
cry.
oh my God, my mom literally, she said it in the moment. She handled it really well. Oh,
Hmm.
that's so interesting. Oh, I see.
Hmm.
Wow. Oh, that's so great. Okay, just hold on 1 minute. And she said she walked around the corner of the house and called my dad, and who
Sobbed.
is
Yeah.
has a home office, so he was next door. And he calls my dad, get over here. You're not going to believe what your daughter's saying. So my dad comes running over and starts talking to me and, goes through all the things that just happened. And that was
Mhm.
kind of one of the first things that I experienced as a child that I openly started talking about.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So
And did you do like did you have was it like part of your life or was it just like instances like random like just like a few spotty things or more regular?
no, it was pretty consistent. For example, like I would just walk outside and I tell my mom about the fairies in the garden and I would tell them about all the nature spirits. And I remember as a kid like driving in the car and being able to feel and see energy.
Hmm.
So as a kid I used to pretend that I had like this cape, like energy cape around my neck,
Hmm.
and that as we drove this like cape of love would just flow behind me and just like touch, like fill everything that we pass, the trees, the ground, the people with all of
Wow.
this love energy. Um, so there were a lot of different experiences. At one point, I told my mom, one of her guest childhood friends had come over, and I was probably like a young kid at this point. And after she left, I told my mom, I said, Mommy, I feel so bad for that lady. And she says, Well, why? I said, Her whole aura is black.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, whoa, okay. Didn't know what to do with that. Less than a week later, we found out that she had really advanced cancer.
Wow.
So it was one of those things where it was always a part of my life, and I
Hmm.
and I assume because my parents fostered it and was able to help me learn and nurture, it was
Hmm.
something that just kind of was a normal part of my life to some extent, even into adulthood. I thought everybody kind of could do this. I didn't realize that this was something that was kind of unique either.
Right. I know. Well, I wonder like when Grace was in first grade or kindergarten, she told me later that she said, "Oh, did you see the angel over there?" to like one of her classmates, and they didn't. They were like they looked at her like she was crazy. She's like, "That's when I learned I couldn't talk about it at school." So did you have
Yeah.
anything like that where you felt like peers were like, "No, I don't see what you're talking
Yes.
about."
Absolutely, yes. That was a big theme, and I remember loving myself completely, but at the same time, almost wishing that I was, like, normal to some
Hmm.
extent.
Right.
But there were definitely instances like that. For example, like, we used to call in my family, we call your soul your star, and it was, like, a
Hmm.
really great imagery because as a kid, especially, you could picture a star, and you can picture a star lighting yourself up inside of
Yeah.
you. Um, so when I said that and in school one day, I think because I went to Catholic school for when I was younger, and I think we were talking about souls or something like that, and the teacher said, "Okay, so who knows what this is called?" And expecting an answer like the Holy Spirit or something more traditional, and I was like putting my hand up, like, "Hey, okay, I got the answer," and they said, "It's called a star," and the teacher was like, "No, like, what are you
Aw.
talking about?"
Aw.
And I went home and I hysterically cried to my mother.
Aw.
My mom marched into the school and said, "How dare you tell a child that that's not right?" And the
Yeah.
teacher, being the kind soul and the wonderful person that she was, the next day was explaining to the class saying that, like, listen, everybody calls it differently. Like,
Right.
Tori's family calls it a star, this person calls it this, and kind of was like
Right.
really kind of embracing. and kind of like, fix the situation. And I went home to my mom and said, "Oh, my teacher said this." And my mom's like, "Okay, good."
An educational moment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Mhm.
Um, when you mentioned how you saw the dark aura in the lady who was sick,
Mhm.
it made me think of another story that I just experienced with a friend who was having concerns about her pregnancy, and she played it off, and then when I got in the car when I left, all of a sudden I felt very sad, and I was like, "Ooh, this is hers," you know. And then I
Yeah.
told her, and then everything was fine. It was just like one little scan that was enough to freak her out, but everything was actually fine. But it's weird how we can like pick up on stuff, even if superficially things seem okay, you know. So that lady actually probably didn't know that she had cancer, and but that you could see it. That's really amazing. So you were able to keep seeing auras throughout your childhood and into adulthood, like it never went away.
Yeah, there was so yeah, for the most part I could see it all the way through my life. There was a brief period, law school does crazy things to you.
I imagine.
But there was a period where I felt like I had to create a part of myself in order to be successful
Hmm.
in the quote unquote real world, right?
Right.
So there was a point where I was in law school and it was so time demanding and it was so just kind of regimented that I felt like I couldn't be the happy go lucky, spiritual, love everyone person that I
Hmm.
am.
Yeah.
And so I wound up feeling like I had to make compromises. And
Hmm.
that started in law school and it kind of continued through in my corporate career early on, where I just little by little would just make little compromises on kind of how I presented myself or what parts of myself I was able to share
Right.
with like my professional life. And so the closer I got to the more compromises I made, the less intense my gifts were.
Hmm.
And it kind of worked the same way on kind of when I went through that a spiritual awakening and came back to this other side now.
Hmm.
So the more I embraced my authenticity, the more I loved myself as I truly am,
Hmm.
the more that these gifts kind of started to expand. And once they started to expand again, it kind of expanded beyond what I had experienced previously.
That's cool. That's a good lesson. You never did, you went into tax, so you never were like working in a courtroom with people.
I actually got a clerkship right out of law school. I got a clerkship with the tax courts of New Jersey. So I was working in the tax courts, which is a
Hmm.
little bit different than a traditional courtroom.
Hmm.
And then from there, I wound up going into what's called like a transactional tax position. Actually worked for an international accounting firm doing tax law. And so I was doing more of like the consulting side and the planning side, the consulting side, working with like a lot of financial services companies and whatnot, which is kind of like the polar opposite
Well, because
of what
I
is
was just,
spiritual and what is like
well, I know,
what
because I'm
is
like,
like
how does your
holistic.
gifts come into play there? Because like I knew a girl who was late to waking up her gifts and was a lawyer, and
Okay.
her, you know, like prosecution, whatever. I don't know anything about law, but like, you know, she talked to people on the stand or would challenge them, and she just always knew when they were lying. So, but she didn't know that she had a gift, but she just knew she was really good at knowing what was going on, you know. So I was curious if like your skills like played out in any kind of environment like that, but it doesn't sound, I mean, I'm sure it did in some ways, but if
It
anything
was
compromised you more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I think that that experience in my life was a huge lesson for me in terms of like being able to fully accept who I am in my entire authenticity.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, to be in a place where learning experiences are great, but when you start compromising your who you are or what your beliefs are or how
Hmm.
you live your life or what's important to you, like setting your priorities
Hmm.
accordingly, that's kind of when things go from okay, you're having a learning experience to flipping the switch to okay, now you're just compromising who you are and you're not
Right.
standing in your power, you're not standing in your authenticity. So I really channeled my gifts in when I was mentoring like colleagues or people who I was like helping to expand their careers.
Hmm.
And that was like almost like my little like back of my head type thing. Like, okay, well, if I can do good, at least I'm gonna do good for the people on my team and like,
Hmm.
support them and love them and nurture them type thing.
Right. So when you had your uh awakening, or your that realization in 2019 with the birth of your son, was it going back to work that made you not want to go back to work? What was it that triggered it, and what did you do first with developing whatever came
Yeah.
next?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So what led up to that break, what I call my breakdown breakthrough moment was,
Mhm.
I had my son, and I was very similar to what you described earlier in terms of I was, leaving early in the morning. I was waking him up and having like fun in the morning. And then I was going to work and spending like long work day. I'd get home. Hopefully I'd get home by 6, spend an hour and a half with him before he'd go to bed, and then I'd quickly eat some dinner, get back on the computer, and then work until whenever the work got done, usually between 11 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
Jeez Louise.
So it was it was a crazy lifestyle. And I realized that like the thing I loved more than anything was being a mom. And that was
Hmm.
the one thing that I was not allowing myself to do, because it
Right.
constantly felt like I was trading work for what I wanted.
Yeah.
And nothing was ever satisfied.
Hmm.
So it got to a point, in addition, I was actually living up in Boston at this time. And I was away from family. We didn't have any family. We had a couple of friends in the area, but we really didn't have any roots there. So I
Hmm.
was on my own, which was really a tough situation in itself.
Right.
And on top of that, it just kind of kept building. My son had a couple of minor medical things we needed to work through. So he had to have a minor surgery. There was a complication. Everything just kind of kept building, building, building over the course of that first year of my son being born. And then 2019, literally, like I felt my ego just break. Like my ego just snapped in half. Like everything was just like done. We are so done right now.
Hmm.
And from there, it was a matter of, like, I look at it in retrospect, my ego was, I was so focused on the things that my ego was prioritizing
Hmm.
that I wasn't allowing myself to think of anything else. The things I was holding on to so dearly that were so important, my law license, my job, making sure that my kid had a beautiful house to live in, all the things that I thought I needed, there
Right.
was no room for anything else. So I had to have that
Hmm.
breakdown, breakthrough moment, because that ego needed to completely shatter so I could pick
Yeah.
up the pieces.
Yeah. And then
So,
where did you get, like, so then at that moment, was it like, okay, I need to stop this job? And or did you take a Reiki course on the side? Like what what led to you leaving your job ultimately and then stepping fully into the healer kind of, or coach
yeah.
role?
So from that, I started to reshuffle my book of business. I started to I we reprioritized our lives. I actually moved back from Boston back home to New Jersey, so we were around family, which is a huge priority for me. That's
Hmm.
like my core right there.
Right.
And when we did that, I slowly was starting to try and see if I could either reshuffle, transition to a different job, transition to a different position, or just give up my job altogether, just take a
Hmm.
break from the career or just give it up.
Hmm.
And that I wound up getting pregnant with my second son, which was amazing. Took an extended maternity leave to see what it was like to be at home with the kids
Hmm.
full time, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I love being a mom. Being a mom is like one of the best things in my whole life. That's like, if I do one thing right, I want to make sure I'm doing a mom right now.
Yeah.
So, but I slowly started to set my priorities, to decide what was truly important to my heart. And it
Hmm.
was a long process of connecting back to my heart and allowing my heart to lead the way.
Hmm.
I had to shift that energy structure, almost like
Yeah.
creating a new hierarchy within my being,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying like, no, the heart is important, and it's not only just important, it is the most important thing
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
life.
Totally.
And once I was able to kind of restructure that energy and that priority system within myself, all the dominoes started to kind of line up. And I wound up going to the Dharma Coaching Institute, and I was able to really embrace that life purpose coaching. It
Hmm.
was a spiritual life coaching program. So I was able to really kind of dig into my spiritual roots, bring up like, oh my God, I forgot how amazing this is and how important this is. Got into a daily meditation schedule, really just kind of being able to embrace who I am.
Hmm.
And then after the life coaching program, I took my Reiki training, and slowly started to expand into energy healing. Um, and and then now I'm also finishing up my Akashic Records training as well, which has really been amazing too.
I tell your story to a lot of people about when you came for like, you're like, what else can I do for grounding or for protection or whatever it was that you felt like you didn't fully know. And and I just mentioned the violet flame,
Yes.
and you're like, wow, that was big. You did it so fast. And I was like, oh, I did do it? Like,
Yes.
like, oh shit. Like I didn't realize that I thought I was just talking, like I don't know. It blows my mind that you see it so clearly. It's like that made it more real for me to hear your feedback. I was like, oh my God. So I told
That
a lot
was
of people that story because it's
Oh, that
like
that was so
amazing.
cool. That was awesome. I just remember sitting there and you just did this little thing with your wrist. It was like this little flick of
Just
your
like
wrist, like
just
like
just
just a
like
little
yeah.
flame. And it was like, sometimes when I see it, it's like, like a little like tiny little flame, like a little candle flick type thing. And
Yeah.
you just like went like whoosh, and it was like a on fire. I was like, whoa, that was cool. That was awesome.
That's so amazing. I love
Yeah.
that you can see that stuff so clearly. So then and like, you would pop in the store and we'd talk or whatever, like, but then it wasn't until just whatever 6 weeks ago or something when I asked you for a session or whatever, maybe it was January, I don't know. And that was cool too. So that's what prompted me to ask you to come on the show, because not only, did you pick up on, like the mom thing, of course, like, God, I love being a mom so much. And like, I told you before we hit record, like I went my son to get his wisdom teeth out like 2 weeks ago. And before we left, I think I mentioned this again just in the last podcast or two that I recorded. But anyway, I skipped off basically to be like, take care of my son. Like I like kissed my husband goodbye. And I like was so happy to like go be needed. So
Yeah.
it's a lovely thing to be a mom. And it's really a hard thing to watch it slipping away. So this is where I'm at now, and you picked up on that, and all you said was, are there transitions? And then I just like broke into tears. But then the other really cool part of that session was the whole past life aspect, and like the shrouded figure and all of that. So it's just neat that you were able to just we don't always know what we're going to get until it happens, as a practitioner. So I was like, well, what else is up with this shoulder like that I can't access? And then you're like, oh, I'm picking up on this other lifetime, and I talked about that like 2 episodes ago. But yeah, so when you work with people, so like what, like how do sessions look typically? Like typically you do distance. For me, you came in person because I asked, but typically you do distance, and it's about an hour or so, or maybe an hour and a half, and you just talk with people, tune into their energy, like tell people how you work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I practice, as you mentioned, I practice long distance healings. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm tapping into that quantum energy where I'm actually energetically able to connect with you from any place, phone call, video conference, in person, it doesn't matter. When you give me permission, I'm able to be with you in an energetic way.
Mm-hmm.
And some people who, for example, are like more sensitive when I do long distance healings can actually feel me tapping in or kind of like feel tingling in certain areas or feel certain sensations. But for energetic purposes, when I do my healings, I'm right there with you, even if I'm not physically there,
Mm-hmm.
which is super fun, and I love doing it. The way that the sessions look from kind of like a logistics period or perspective is there's always a kind of a customized meditation that can look many different ways depending upon what the person's spirit guides are telling me. So I usually do a meditation before the session, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the background. So I'll do a meditation before the session. I'll kind of ask the spirit guides, ask for the soul's permission to be able to do the healing, talk to the spirit guides that are connected with the person or the client,
Are
and
you
ask
getting,
them.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you getting an impression of number of guides, names and faces, or are you just getting like an overall energy of like these are their guides, and you just trust the messages you hear? Like are you getting to know them, more individually? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. So, I haven't had a position where there's been specific names given,
Mm-hmm.
but it depends on the person. So, there's been a number of readings where I've seen specific number. I've actually seen their guides, and they come through, and they're people. They're kind of like sitting at a conference table or coffee table, like
Right.
shooting the shit, for lack of a better term. But then there are times where they're a bit more, like ethereal. They're come in more as like energy figures than they do as actual people.
Right.
And it's it's interesting because when I tap into that space, it's almost like you're translating a language. Like
Right.
and it's in that ethereal space, in that kind of healing space, you are translating light language into different senses.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm explaining to a client different messages that are coming through, sometimes and then many times, the messages don't resonate with me because they're not my messages.
Right.
So I have to kind of interpret things in the best way I can or use different analogies to explain
Mm-hmm.
what I'm interpreting.
Right.
So, because for example, it's kind of like using your taste buds to explain how something smells.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very it's not a direct translation.
Right.
So when I'm going into that preparatory meditation to do a healing session, a lot of times I will lightly tap in just on their energetic field in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I will kind of see what the generally is going on in their energy field.
Mm-hmm.
I will tap in and ask their spirit guides, is there any messages that you need to transmit or should be transmitted during this healing?
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of get an overall sense of what's going to be necessary during this healing session.
Mm-hmm.
Most times, and sometimes I'll use an oracle card or a tarot card to kind of like provide some visual confirmation of what's going on.
Right.
And it's not like I go through rifle through the deck and like pick one. Like it's just, whatever jumps out, and it's usually completely on point with whatever
Yeah.
came up during the pre-meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And once I get into the session itself, I have a few different that you do a few different meditations that I have in mind. But once we get into that meditative state, I allow the high frequency beings, usually the angels or God source energy directly, or different, there's a prayer that I say beforehand, please, dear God, only allow us to connect with the highest vibrational beings to provide us with divine messages that are necessary at the present point in time. So
Mm-hmm.
you're only connecting with those highest frequency beings to provide the messages that are necessary.
Yeah.
So, and then from there, once we connect with those higher frequency beings, we do our grounding work, our protection work to make sure there's a beautiful bubble of protection. We go into the meditation. We go in from the meditation into the healing where I actually reach across into the energetic field and I'm able to clear out any blockages.
Right.
And then from there, that's when the coaching aspect kind of kicks in, is from that energetic, the energy healing itself, we cleared the blockages. Now we go from the subconscious part of things to the conscious. And that's where I feel like the coaching is like such an essential part of this process, is that you're actually taking what was subconsciously going on with those energy blocks and you're bringing it to the conscious mind to be able to allow that person to embrace the lessons that came along with whatever blockages were coming up.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And when you were working with me, I felt like we work similarly, and like the imageries and stuff that we get. It was kind of cool to like, it's always neat. Like somebody else the Zazu, she also sees imagery the way I do too. It's like so neat that energy is energy, and we're just doing our best to interpret it. So sometimes when I'm giving my summary to people, like we screw up if we get in our own way with interpreting, so like that's where it's like it can be tricky. So if I ever feel like not confident about how I'm interpreting an image, I'll just tell them the image. I usually tell them the image anyway, but like, like I don't as confidently give the interpretation. I'll be like, okay, listen, this is what I'm seeing. And then they're like, oh my God, like it's relevant to them in a way that there's no way I could know. So
yes.
it's just like, it's just so cool. So how are you going to weave in Akashic Records into this? Are you going to weave it in, or is it going to be a separate offering?
So basically the kind of the way that I do my services is that I provide two different offerings.
Mm-hmm.
There's the one-off individual healing. So it's a private session where it's just that one session, or there's a package, what's called a 3-month package. As in an effort to stand in my full authenticity, because I learned that one the hard way the first time. I'm not going back. So when you book a session with me, you get all of me. So you get the human design, you get the life coaching, you get the energy healing, you get everything.
Yeah,
That's
because
just,
it's
you
like
get
this
me.
is your medley of gifts. So why would you want to separate it out? And
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And I never want to be in a position where I'm like, "Ooh, I know human design would definitely benefit in this particular situation, but she didn't pay for it, so I'm not going to give it to her." Like
right.
I'm not about gatekeeping that way. I'm just like,
Yeah,
"Listen, you're paying for me, you get all of me. Here I
right.
am." Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
so
it's all part of the package that makes you you.
yes,
So,
exactly. Yes.
so if you feel called to like tap into the Akashic records during a session, you'll do it. But if they're coming to you for Akashic records, obviously you could
Exactly.
incorporate that too. So how does it
Yeah.
look when you are it's like with the Akashic record reading, like I know it basically, are you just going to like a giant filing cabinet and pulling things records out, or are you just getting images because you're like tuning into the Akashic field and like you just get images?
So the formal Akashic Records readings are very structured, and it's fascinating. I'm like totally geeking out over this, so like bear with me here. But like
Sure.
it's so Akashic Records readings is one of the a couple of the different parts of a foundation Akashic Records reading is actually tapping into the chakras that are your primary gifts.
Mhm.
So for different incarnations, you can actually highlight different chakras. You do it kind of on the front end when you're about to incarnate and you're like, okay, so I want like, option A and B to be like my primary gifts in this life.
Mhm.
And so you're actually able to identify those primary chakras gifts, and you're identifying the archangels that are associated with helping you develop those gifts.
Mhm.
You're also able to identify your soul origins. So
Right.
there's our soul, there's a number of people on the planet Earth that are specifically from Earth, but for a number of us, our souls actually, like, for lack of a better term, cut our teeth or like had our formidable years in other star systems.
Mhm.
And so when we go into a foundation Akashic records reading, you're actually able to tap into those soul origins.
Mhm.
And there's a number of different places that a soul can be from: Lyra, Pleiadian, the inner earth, there's a number of different places. And so when I do a foundational Akashic records reading, I'm actually going in and being able to identify some of these different aspects of a particular soul.
Mhm.
So, and there's a number of different elements that go into it. These are just kind of a couple of things that are touched upon during these readings.
Right.
But life lessons is another one. Like, we come into this incarnation with like a laundry list of things we want to achieve. So you can actually tap into what are the specific life lessons that you wanted to learn. What percentage of the way are you through to those life lessons? Are you like 5% there? Are you like 80% there?
Mhm.
And you can kind of see, what's your progress. And there's a number of different areas that you can tap into, like that. It's good to have a foundational Akashic record reading first to be able
Mhm.
to kind of lay all of these things out, and then you build upon that as you move forward, being able to ask more specific questions.
Yeah, I had a few of them done, and I forget the one system that they said I was in. They're like, oh, it doesn't exist anymore though. It looks like the it I want to say it's not Larimar. Larimar is a crystal, but it reminds me of Larimar. It has like that blue and white. It was some kind of water-based planet or something. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I don't know. But like I know it is so interesting. And
Are,
I don't
are you
know.
thinking about Lemuria?
No, because
No, no. Okay.
that's here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I forget, but it's in that Starseed deck. If you have that, that Starseed card deck, I don't know,
Yeah.
but like Oracle deck, it's in there. I remember seeing it like many times since then, but I just it escapes me right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's just so cool. There's so much to know, and it's neat that you can offer all these things for people. And what else? What else? Oh, you're offering the monthly group calls. You said on Saturdays. Like if you are
Yes.
a client of yours, you automatically are invited to be in that call, but otherwise you could choose to kind of attend a Saturday
Hmm.
monthly call just to get like a meditation and the recent energy lowdown or whatever, like support.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's so the monthly calls, they're group calls. It's a lower cost option. So you're able to kind of do the monthly group meditation. We have seasonal like topics that we discuss. And then at the end of the monthly workshops, we also go through a group energy healing, which is optional in case, some people want to participate, some people don't. Totally
Mhm.
respect and love. No, 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 no taking it personal. I get it.
Right, right.
So,
There's only so many
but
hours in a day too. People just
exactly. Yeah.
so your kids are 3, you have 3 kids and your youngest is not quite 1 yet, right? So,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
how old are the other 2?
I have a almost 6-year-old, a 3.5-year-old, and a 8 to 9 month old. We're in
Okay.
between. So,
Yeah, yeah. So you're like they're barely in school, is it, I guess kindergarten or first grade?
yeah, kindergarten and pre-K. Yeah.
Because I was thinking before when you were talking about like, I don't know, being a stay-at-home mom or like, working part-time. It's so funny because when I first started working more regularly when my kids were 8 and 10, I started going to different, networking events and things like that I don't really love to do, but it was necessary to get like, to make connections and get to know people. It served me. That's how I met my business coach. But
It's awesome.
it was so funny because at 2 o'clock, like everyone's like like, oh, this is our job. Like we're here to like, like connect and like, spread the word about what we do and whatever the reason we were gathered was. But once 2 o'clock hit, like everyone was like hitting the road, like everyone's like back to mom, so that's like the greatest thing about having your own business as a young mom, because it does afford you to be able to be home and to work around. Like that's like when with the whole, wisdom teeth, and I was like, this is great though. I can just take off the day and be around to nurse my and he was like, oh, you don't need to take care of me. I'm fine. I'm like, you don't even know what you're up against yet. Like, don't cut me off too soon. And then,
Yeah.
every 20 minutes, he's like, thank you, mommy, and giving him ice packs. And, he only said mommy because he was under the influence, but like, he was hysterical. But it was nice to be able to be around and to like, tailor your schedule to meet your kids' needs. So good for you that you found this now and you can, pursue your passion and like have your own life within being a mom. It's not either or. So I don't know. It's
Thank you.
just great. I'm happy for you. And this is
Thank you.
exciting. So, and even though you're in Hillsdale, it doesn't matter because people, you work with people remotely. So if anyone's
Mhm.
interested in getting in touch with you, um, is your website your business name, or is it like,
Yes.
altered at all? It's just Philosophy Porch
Yep,
or
you can go to philosophyporchcoaching.com
Mhm.
and there's a bunch of information there. I have all the social media, so I'm a couple different platforms in case you want to just check in and see if my style resonates with you in any way. I take a very personal approach to my clients. They, in many cases, they wind up becoming my friends
Mhm.
because it's a very personal experience, and
Mhm.
to kind of to approach it with a very open heart and a loving, compassionate way is, I think, a really big part of the process. So, and thank you for saying that about being a mom because it's such a wonderful thing, and I'm so happy you got to be there with Andrew. That's so nice.
I know, and to be able to go down to Rutgers and pick up Grace whenever I need to is also very nice too. So
That's
yeah, we're
great.
we're lucky to be present for our children.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I also wanted to mention you have a podcast too. So what is that?
Yes. Yes. So it's called Angels on the Porch,
Mhm.
and it's basically going through. It's a new podcast, so we're just kind of slowly starting to ramp up things, but hopefully be able to have you on the podcast as well soon. That'd be awesome. Tell us
Yeah.
all about all the beautiful magic in your life. And but it's yeah, slowly starting to work that up. There's some guided meditations on there, some personal stories about my origin story, if you will, and all that fun stuff. So there's some, hopefully, if you feel called, love to have you visit.
And it started as porch because it was 2020, right? And you were like just doing things on the porch. Is that how it came about?
So actually the philosophy porch is there's a little bit of a story behind that one. The philosophy porch is actually something that's very near and dear to my heart because it's an extension of what we used to do as a kid with my family.
Mhm.
Like every night after dinner, we have like little side porch off my family home,
Mhm.
and we would go clean up the dinner and like get everything ready, everybody get ready for bed, and then we would go and sit outside on the porch, and it was kind of like this safe space where you could just talk about anything. You could talk
Mhm.
about anything you wanted, and it wasn't crazy, and it wasn't like weird, and it wasn't taboo. It was anything that's on your mind in pretty much
Mhm.
every space of life. We talk about like the global state of things. We talk about who, tripped and fell at school. We talked about, in mommy words, the boo-boos and the wonderful joys of life. Like it was, it was just, it was everything. And it was where I kind of got my origins of being able to feel like I could open my heart and be able to really just talk about anything I wanted to. And a big part of that was my dad, who is like one of my best friends. And he created this space for us on the philosophy porch. And we would come and visit at any points in time. And I was out there like every day. Like, and certain times I was like, nah, I'm not going to go hang out with my friends. I'm going to go sit on the porch with my dad, like hang out. So with naming my company the Philosophy Porch is a reflection of what I seek to create for my
Mhm.
clients, is to create that safe space, to be able to hold that space for people to really be able to explore themselves and then to open their souls in a place where they feel safe and loved and supported, and be able to really just grow in a place where they feel like they are safe to do that.
That's really cool. I don't know why I just assumed because it was I remember seeing a therapist on her porch during 2020, so I figured that's how it came about, but that's an
Oh,
even better story, so
oh, thank you. Yeah,
that's awesome that you were in such a safe, nurturing home. Like, it's it's a it's a rare thing, I realize how rare it is the older you get. You're like, wow, you're lucky that you had that kind of stability and security in your upbringing.
yeah, thank
Um,
you. I'm
yeah,
very grateful for it. Yeah.
yeah, me as well. Um, even if, like as an adult, you can look back and be like, oh, maybe this was messed up, but that's like to be in a loving home, that's not a given.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming today. It was nice talking to you and getting to hear your story and sharing you with everybody. So,
Of
um,
course.
yeah, so I
Um,
look forward to seeing you again whenever, and
sounds
and
good.
have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate everything that you are. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to be at Moo Magic all the time because I'll come say hi and go do services because you're amazing. And I'm super grateful. Thank you so much. I really
Yeah,
appreciate you.
thank you too. Thanks, Tori.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.